Hi everyone. So now we're going to be talking about anthropology. So if you watched, hopefully you did, the recording on like introductions, right? I talked about myself a little bit, went into the class like super briefly. I mentioned that when I took this class many years ago, I did not know what anthropology was. And so I'm assuming that's probably a handful of you. When I took this class many years ago, I did not know what anthropology was. All I knew was that to get my associates, I needed a science with a lab, and I wasn't going to take biochem. Little did I know later that I would be doing a lot of bio stuff. But so I signed up for the class, and I took it, and it changed the trajectory of my whole life journey. So if that's you, don't feel like, oh, I don't even know what we're doing. That was me, and I'm your instructor. So, you never know. People change their direction all the time. People change their majors. Maybe I'll inspire one of you. But anyway, so let's do a discussion on this. So just like before, the PowerPoints are in Canvas in our core shell. In modules, you'll say PowerPoints, and then it'll have them all there for you. And just like it's going to have, the lectures too, it's going to have them all listed. So you can follow along with me. You can do side by side on your screen. You can, listen to me and then just have the PowerPoint pulled up, like whatever way works best for you. I'm low tech, right? So this is the way we're doing it. It's fine, because I've taken a class where it was just the PowerPoint and you could just hear the teacher's voice. And it's like, okay, that was okay, but I feel like you need to see like my reactions. I might want to write something on the board, you know what I mean? So probably not today, but in future lessons for sure I will. Maybe, I don't want to jinx myself, maybe I'll write something today. Anyway, okay, so like I said, I want to keep these to about 30 minutes or less. Some of them might go a little over depending on if I'm demonstrating something, if I'm doing something on the board. I'm going to try to keep them short and sweet. And also because you can pause these, you can record them, so I'm probably just going to move kind of quickly. It's not like in class where you're like writing notes down, you're like, oh, slow down a little bit, right? I can go through this quickly, and remember, this is supposed to be a refresher for you from what you had in the lecture. Now, for many of you, I know maybe you had the lecture so long ago you don't really remember, but still, hopefully, this is kind of, a refresher for you. So let's get into what is anthropology. So following along on the slides, right? So first slide. So the field of anthropology, so in a general sense, this is the study of humans. Obviously, that's a very broad statement, right? So we have 4 subfields for anthropology. Typically in most departments, in universities, you'll see it split up into these 4. Sometimes you might see one of these in another department, like as an example. So the 4 fields are biological, cultural, archaeology, and linguistics. Some universities, though, the linguistics will be like in its own department, or sometimes the biological anthropologist will actually be like in the bio department. It just depends on where, but typically it's kind of the standard setup of all anthropologists are in the same department. It's this what we call like a 4-field approach, working together sometimes, depending on your subfield. Next slide. So the first one, biological anthropology. So that's what we're going to be doing in this class, but I am going to give you that kind of quick overview of the others just so you have a general idea of what anthropology as a whole is. So I have a few examples of biological anthropology. So we've got paleo, which is what I focus on for my research, human osteology, we're going to do both of those in this class, primatology, behavioral ecology, forensic anthropology. These are just ones you probably or maybe have heard of. There are many more, right? Because it's like anthropology, and then it's like all the subfields and the sub-subfields and the sub-subfields, right? So that's true for like any field, but now you're going to kind of get this quick overview. And like I said, biological anthropology is what we're going to focus on in this class. So as a few examples, paleo, so this is the study of like fossils, like the human fossil record. So everything leading up into Homo sapiens, like since our split with chimpanzees. So I'm reaching for a pen. So let's see if you might use this, right? So just so we're clear, and if you take only like 5 things away from this entire class, this should probably be one of them. Humans did not evolve from chimpanzees. We share a common ancestor with them. So, and then the last common ancestor, I almost wrote my name instead of human. So, and this is about 6 million years ago. 6 million years ago. So you're probably going to see me draw this or some version of it like 80 times throughout the semester. It's a good visual of this evolutionary split. So everything since that split, everything like in the human lineage, there's a lot of branching events, species that kind of branched off and died off, and all that. We'll talk about that later in the semester. But anything in that lineage, that evolutionary lineage, is what a paleoanthropologist would focus on. Maybe on one of those species, like maybe you focus on Neanderthals, or maybe you focus on tool use for Neanderthals and Homo erectus, or something like that. So you can see some images here. We've got like a Homo erectus full skeleton on the slide, the skull, and when we get to the paleo section in this class, we'll go into the details of each of these species in our lineage and like how you can differentiate them. You're going to have to be doing you're going to be doing some identification too. The next subfield, human osteology. So in general, like any anthropologist usually has some introductory knowledge of human osteology, since we use it so much in really a lot of the subfields. So we're going to be doing that in this class, right? Talking about, naming some of the bones. That you're going to learn the names. You're going to learn some of the features of the bones. You're going to learn how to determine whether you're looking at a male or female, like skull or pelvis. The age of someone. Are they young? Are they middle-aged? Are they older? So we'll be going into that in this class as well. The next slide, primatology. So kind of in the name, right? So these are anthropologists who study primates. Typically, it's not compared to humans, but sometimes it is. You might be doing research on chimpanzees, for example, so you might compare it to like human behavior, if you're looking at chimp behavior or something. But a lot of times it's just, you're looking at one species, or you're focusing on like locomotion patterns. So like, are they bipedal? Are they quadrupedal? Or you're looking at social behaviors amongst, apes or monkeys, or you're looking at like their anatomy and how that's, evolved through time. So there's a lot of things you can focus on being a primatologist. The next one, behavioral ecology. So this is really looking at specifically human behavior, and like relatedness of individuals and how our certain behaviors will change whether you're closely related to someone or not, especially in terms of when resources are high or when resources are low. So this is a very interesting subfield. And then the next one, forensic anthropology. So this is one you probably have heard of already. Forensics this, forensics that, everything's forensics now, right? Which is cool. You may have seen the show Bones. So that show Bones focuses on a forensic anthropologist. Like some of that's just like TV, right? It's not always super accurate, but you get the general idea of what a forensic anthropologist would do. So they're looking at, trying to solve crimes usually. So if it's in the last 50 years, let's say if someone finds remains and they're like, oh, I think this was foul play, they're going to probably call in a forensic anthropologist to determine how old this was. Like, oh, are these remains from 10 years ago? Well, now we've got an open case. We could prosecute someone possibly, right? Or is this the remains of someone who maybe was murdered, but it was 200 years ago? That's not a legal court case, right? You'd probably refer that to like a a bioarchaeologist, or maybe just even like the local, museum or something, for those remains. The next one, cultural anthropology. So I do teach the cultural anthropology course here. In fact, I think I'm going to be teaching it in the fall, I think. I usually teach that one a little more sporadically. And there's a lot of overlap between what we do in bio and what we do in cultural in terms of what the material for the course. And so the discussions they're definitely different in certain aspects, but similar in ways as well. But anyway, so some subfields of cultural anthropology, I have so many, but I have a couple listed, like medical anthropology or ethnographic analysis. So we can just go through these slides, right? So the first one, medical anthropology. You might be thinking medical anthropology, that kind of sounds like it would be part of biological anthropology, not cultural, right? Under that umbrella. But medical anthropology actually focuses on the social or cultural aspects of medicine. What are the common practices within that culture? Do your medical professionals have to have a rigorous education, or is it more informalized? Is there a religious connection between what your population is practicing in terms of medicine, or is there is religion separate? All of those interesting connections between the different aspects of culture and medicine. And then even diseases, what's going on in the cultural aspect of what foods are being eaten or things like that, and then how that reflects on the diseases that might be more or less prominent given a particular culture. Next slide, ethnographic analysis. Ethnographic analysis, this is kind of the old school way. usually most cultural anthropologists did their at least early research. So let's say you're working on your PhD, you would find a population you want to live with, and you would live with them for a fairly extended period of time, like 6 months, a year and a half. And then you would basically write a book. Now, these range from being very subjective, like just someone's personal perspective and opinion, to very like sciencey data being collected, have an Excel spreadsheet, you're actually analyzing this. But typically it's a smaller book, and even with the ones that are pretty sciencey, you usually still get kind of a story. You still get the personal perspective of, the scientist and this new community they're living in. And so that's always, pretty interesting. Not a lot of them do that as much anymore in terms of writing the ethnographic, like writing that book. Usually, you might still find a lot of cultural anthropologists go and live with other populations, but it might be for maybe like a summer, maybe 6 months. And usually you're, in academia now, usually you're just like producing, papers. Also, next slide, you could also just be a cultural anthropologist who looks at a particular aspect of culture, like you examine religion amongst different populations, or you look at, let's see what I have, like reproduction in different populations, like the rituals or practices around reproduction, like if you're like, oh my God, if you're in a population that uses like midwives or stuff like that, so all of those interesting aspects of reproduction. Food that you're eating, you could be a cultural anthropologist who just looks at diet amongst like one population or multiple, right? So really, as a cultural anthropologist, you have a little more leeway of what you want to focus on and how you want to focus on it. The next one, so the next subfield, archaeology. Most of you have heard of this one, right? So here we've got the most famous archaeologist on the PowerPoint slide. And you see that I have this underlined. Archaeology, this is the study of material culture, not remains. If you come across remains, let's say you're an anthropologist and you're like, oh, I'm an archaeologist and I now have unearthed this site, you're going to focus on like the tools, the weapons, the housing structures, like the buildings, like that kind of stuff, the clothing. And then you're going to call in your colleague who's like a bioarchaeologist or a forensic anthropologist or something like that to maybe look at the remains. So just material culture for archaeologists. The next few slides just kind of differentiate between what we call like prehistorical archaeology and historical archaeology. And really the main difference is are you an archaeologist working at a location or a site that has a written record, or does it have no written record? If you come across a site and you have no written record, even if the written record's like old, you have nothing, you're gonna trying to parse out what you're seeing and why you're seeing it and what really is going on at that site is going to be a lot more difficult versus if you have a written record of, you might notice there's a lot of children that have the remains of children because there's a written record that in 1750 there was a disease that came through. You know what I mean? So when you have a written record, what you're seeing in the actual site can make a lot more sense. So those two slides just kind of go into the difference between those two things. And then the next slide, cultural resource management. I actually have a friend who works in cultural resource management. So this is like a real world, kind of non-academic-y sort of kind of job you could get as an archaeologist. Basically, and most of you have probably seen this happen without even realizing what you're seeing. So we have in Vegas, right, a lot of new housing developments. God, it's like a new one every day. They're going to be building like the train, whatever. There's always a stadium or the freeways, right? They're always building stuff, sometimes on land that hasn't been touched yet. Basically, there has to be a lot of surveying that goes on before that process where you, like as an anthropologist, like I said, I have a friend who works in cultural resource management. Basically, he and his team, they go out to these areas where maybe they're going to want to build a new building or something. And they have to survey the area to make sure they're not finding remains, to make sure they're not finding any kind of like, artifacts that could be, given to the local museum, or that, depending on what they are, have to stay there and you actually can't build on that, right? There's also like non-anthropology. There's also people who do this. I forget what their title is, but if there's like endangered species, they also have to come and survey to make sure they're not building on an area where there's like an endangered species and stuff. So there's a lot that goes in pre-actually building stuff, like in the background, right? So that's kind of it's not really a super academic-y job, but you would still be doing anthropology a little bit. The next one, bioarchaeology. I know quite a few people who are bioarchaeologists, so it's kind of mirroring the two of biology and archaeology. So typically the idea here is that when you're looking at something on the body, let's say you're noticing in a population, everyone in this population, let's say you're looking at remains, right? Everyone has really, jacked up shoulders, like their shoulder bones are all like, there's a lot of arthritis or something. Now you would want to look at the material culture to see, I wonder why that is. Maybe there's a certain tool that they all use. And you're like, oh, I have to kind of look at both of these things to make the connection, to kind of get the bigger picture. So this is more of an emerging field really in the last like 20 years, where it's kind of, like I said, this pairing of these two subfields. The next one, and number 4, linguistics. Linguistics, so this is basically the study of changes in language, whether that's, just because language changes just in general, like it just changes over time, whether this is because of, certain populations coming in contact with each other, either in peaceful ways or non-peaceful ways, and et cetera, et cetera. Let's see, so, the next slide, ethno-linguistics. This is a very interesting topic. So this is looking at, God, I took a class where we focused on mostly this for like half the semester. I could really get into a lot of details, but this is not a linguistics course, right? So this is looking at language, like the words we use and how we conceptualize those things and how that might change how we actually perceive things or not, or how our perception might change the words we use. Does that make sense, right? So